Everyone, welcome to this month's second Friday Forum. My name is Cyndy McDonald. I'm so glad to have you here. We have well over 100 people who are registered for this session. So I see people are coming into the room pretty quickly. As you join us, please use your chat to share with us where you're from and just to say hello. This gives us a chance and gives you a chance to see where everybody's from and just to feel that camaraderie that we all have. So as you come into the room, we've got Clay from Wisconsin and looks Jeffrey from Fremont. And please also make sure your link to the chat is changed to panelists and attendees. So great. We've got Marcia here from Whidbey Island, place I've never been. All these places that we see and we want to go to: Chico, Houston, Tacoma, all these different places, Shamish. I'm probably not saying that right, but I'm just so glad to have everybody here today. And I can't believe we're at the end of May and what we're going to be able to do. So you've got a parent from Cape Town, South Africa. So we're going to have parents in the house. We're so glad. And we're just so glad to have everybody from all over the world here today. And we're going to talk about international students. And I want to introduce my guest. And this is Wendy Beato. And Wendy and I have known each other for a number of years now. And she has just been so gracious, has always answered my questions and different things because she has such great experience as an international counselor. So I know who to go to when I have these questions. So I invited her to come be my guest on the Friday Forum to talk about, especially over the last few years, the international counselor, parents and families coming from an international destination have had a lot of concerns and questions and things. So we've got Dr. Kirsten from Panama. So you can see, Wendy, we've got people from just all over Idaho, Philadelphia, Fort Lauderdale. So we're glad to have you all here. So Wendy, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your background and how did you get into the role of being a college counselor?
Hi, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us this evening. It is evening actually in South Africa. I'm not sure where you are. But my name is Wendy Beato, and I am actually originally from the Dominican Republic and immigrated to the US and grew up in New York City. And that is actually quite important because it has a lot to do with how I got into counseling. Being an immigrant child, not knowing what was what and how to get around things. I always say that I am the product of my school counselor who actually took the time to sit with me and say, what are your plans? Where do you want to go? And in doing that, showing me about what are my options, to go to university, how to prepare for SATs back in the days and so on. So it is how having that guidance and having her actually take the time to show me the ropes and that I had options, that I could do things, was one of the things that I felt like I would like to do the same for others. And it has seen me in the different roles that I have held, because I used to be a special ed counselor in New York City, and then I became the ESOL counselor in Florida. I have always worked with students who were either, underrepresented or from immigrant background, who oftentimes, are having to deal with adjusting to a new system and not knowing what else is out there. And because of my counselor, Ms. Fasilo, who I will always remember, I am who I am today. And I just felt like that is something that I would like to do for other people out there.
So tell us what kinds of schools. So you started out as a counselor for special ed. I think that's fascinating. I've never met anybody who actually has a degree or training as a counselor for special ed students. So where did that take you? Did that take you into different schools and different districts? Where did that lead you to, Wendy?
Yeah, so I was part of a program in New York City that was trying to get more people of the same ethnicity into the school so that kids felt like they could relate to their counselors from people that were from the same background. So I went to Fordham University, and there was the program for special needs students in guidance counseling, because there is a different need for those type of students and what they're going through. And when I became a counselor, I used to be a special ed teacher to begin with, and then I became the counselor. I used to work in a middle school and an elementary school. And then I will rotate actually between schools, going from one to the other. When I moved to Florida and I became the ESL counselor, then you're dealing with kids. A lot of my children were either refugees coming from Cuba or from Haiti and so on. So the needs are the same as many other students, but there's the added, acculturation and dealing with other things that you have to deal with when you come into a new country, which I had experienced. So it was definitely beneficial, to have come from the same background. And I was very lucky to be part of that program and be able to help those who were like me at one point.
So how did you end up in Cape Town?
That would be my husband. So that is why we all end up here. All of the ones that are here in South Africa. I always laugh because I used to be the counselor at the American International School here in Cape Town. And all of us who are Americans and so on, we always, we married someone. We met a very handsome person in South Africa. So when my husband actually was studying medicine in Dominican Republic, and that's like a totally long story, that takes us back to apartheid and people who could study where and so on at that time. But met him, married, moved here. And then I worked at a local high school here in South Africa, Fishhook High School, being the counselor and the life orientation teacher, and then moved over to the American International School of Cape Town, where I was actually the first counselor that they hired. I think we had like 80 students, and we went from like 80 students all the way to like 400 and something by the time that I left in 2014. And then since then, I have operated as a independent consultant, working specifically with the South African student population that is thinking about going abroad, which is something that it's really, really specific, because when you come from an American school or an international school, you have this support system that is helping you to get to your tertiary education, whether it's university or whatever you're choosing. You have that support. And a lot of them are thinking about, overseas going. People are going to the UK, Europe, all over the place. Where at the local school, the local school system, there are counselors that are also teachers, and they're not necessarily trained to be assisting with things like learning about how do you apply to the US, how do you do recommendation letters, what should you be looking out for, and so on. And so there was a huge gap in helping those students get there. And in South Africa has actually quite a good system of education, and there's a lot of fantastic students. In my results, I actually have a lot more Ivy League students getting to universities since I became an independent consultant with the South African system, because the quality of students is quite high. And it's sad to think about how many, which I'm going to get into in the next question, is how many students don't think that they have that option to study abroad, and the education that goes into it, letting them know that they actually have choices, because it's all about providing choices and options for students, to what they do with after they graduate. Yeah.
Definitely. So as you've been working and building your expertise and your, knowledge, people know that about you and that you're working with students. What are some of the concerns that your students share as they look at going to colleges in another country? Not necessarily even, the US versus other, but in terms of just leaving South Africa or the country of their origin, what are the concerns that they have?
The first thing that I have identified with working with the students that I do is that they don't know if their qualifications are good enough. Many of them come to me saying, "Oh, do I need to do A levels? Do I need to take AP, exams?" And I'm like, not necessarily. It depends on what you want to study. In the UK, there are some schools that will not accept the local diploma for entry, and there's actually quite a few. Most of them will. And in the US, it's basically, if you have a qualification and the grades, then that's it. So a lot of them are concerned that their grades are not good enough, that they need to go study something further, because they're not going to get accepted. And that's a big misconception, which is one of the things that I have to first tackle. And then once they realize that, okay, great, I can apply, the second thing is going to be so where do you start? Because there isn't, like when I was at the American school, you have your grade 9s, and then grade 10 is the PSATs, and you kind of talk about careers, and grade 11, you take the PSAT again, but then you're doing a lot of more and so on. So there's like a curriculum that you follow, but that doesn't exist in the local school system. So it is about creating almost like a roadmap as to this is what happens. So you first begin here, and then you have to do this. And there's going to be, the recommendation letters. Or if you go into the UK, it's about what marks are they going to be looking for. If you go into the Netherlands, which is one of the regions that I work with as well, is what are they going to be paying attention to, and what else is going to be required as part of the application. So it's they have no idea where to start, and then it becomes overwhelming. And we follow a January to December school calendar, which means that application season for all the regions happens in the middle of the students' final exams. So application season opens is in August. They're writing finals because they graduate in December. So all of this is happening in the middle of exams. So what I try to do with them is the more that you can do prior to that time, so that it's basically just plugging in at the end. It's how we manage the stress. So it is unfortunate for the timeline, but it is what it is, and they have to. It's all about being prepared. So that's one of the things that I will say that is the overwhelm. And I would say the other thing that comes after they know, okay, this is what we can do, is going to be affordability. How can we help pay for education abroad? It is expensive. And I know it's not the same for every region. I know that there are other international students that can very easily afford to study abroad, but I am in Africa, and there is a lot of wealth. I'm not going to lie, in South Africa, there is a lot of wealth, but still it is very expensive. And, and I know families will appreciate having that discount either in a scholarship or in so on. So will be the other concern is there any help for us to, bridge the fees to study abroad, where we want to do that?
So what are the parents' concerns? So students are concerned about their academic. Am I good enough? Can I apply to certain kinds of schools? And how am I going to pay for it? What are the parents' concerns?
So I will say that the parents, one of the concerns, the second question I always get is how can we afford it? So that affordability is a big one for the parents. So that will be like, if not the first, it is the second question that I get is, can I get a scholarship? Because again, like I said, it is expensive. So that's definitely one of the questions. The other thing that they worry about is the quality of education. In South Africa, in Cape Town, we have two wonderful universities that are very highly ranked, the University of Cape Town and Stellenbosch University. They always end up in the rankings. And it's a beautiful city. And many parents are like, if I'm not going to go to a school that is better than UCT or Stellenbosch or WITS or whichever, what is the quality? Like, why not? Why should I send my kid to that school if it isn't ranked the same? And it is about, this is where I also face the whole ranking and brand name, the fact that there is more to life than the 20 universities you have probably heard of. And that is my job as a counselor, is to educate that. And we're going to get into it with FIT. It's like, the brand names, the IVs and so on, is not for everybody. You have to find where you're going to be happy, because you're going to be there for the next 4 to 5 years. So to them, like, why should I send you to that school if it isn't a brand name? And that's one of the things that I have to deal with in explaining to them about the differences of the education that they can get abroad, and about what is it that they're trying to get out of this, of going abroad. Are you going because you want to give your child a world, class education, and also the experience of being able to compete in a global market and that kind of stuff. So you have to remind them. And then in recent years, it's definitely safety and safety, because you hear the news, you hear the shootings and how hostile some governments have been to welcoming international students. There's been quite a bit happening, and not just in the US. There's a lot happening everywhere that has shifted a lot of where students are applying, and that I have noticed in my working with students locally. So there's the safety factor, and also the guidance of what's going to happen to my child once they get there. Who's going to look after them? Who's going to help them, figure out if you get sick, where do you go? If you need to open a bank account. So it's not having control of being there to help if they needed to. So definitely those are the three things that I would say is affordability, quality. Is it worth it? Should they just not stay locally? And then safety and guidance, what they get.
So do a lot of the students know someone that's studied abroad or gone to another country to study, or are they often the first that they're kind of breaking the trail for doing that?
There has been in South Africa, what I noticed is that there has been quite a trend of going to the UK. The UK has been a direct path, because they will either go there for a gap year for studying and so on. But what I've noticed is that there's a lot more opportunities opening up for the USA, for Canada, and now the Netherlands has really taken off in South Africa, and I can actually see why, because of all the things that I've learned about the Netherlands and having an EU passport and how that can help you with fees and so on. So I will say that when I started in 2014, funnily enough, it was one student that I helped. There are many agencies in South Africa, and they've been around for quite a while. And so there has been this recruitment, but it didn't really take off. And then we had a situation that we were in the news for not too long ago about fees must fall, and we had a bit of unrest at the local university, and that drove people to start looking outward and what can they do, because universities kind of closed down for a while, and that since that time people realized that there were options. So it became more popular. I wouldn't say that they are the only ones, but it has become a lot more knowledgeable around friends that, oh, this person went here and so on. So a lot of my referrals come from word of mouth, the people that have heard that this person went there, or I helped a friend and so on. But I will say definitely we have seen a change since we had the situation locally with the universities. And then it just becomes more and more public, as people get into good universities.
That's good. So the ball starts rolling, and then people are able to see and as you said, referrals becomes a big part of it, and just having that chain network of people being able to say, well, I did this, or I know somebody who did that, and that kind of thing. So you've mentioned these different countries. What are the differences between like the UK, the Netherlands, the US, and maybe Canada? They're all different systems. So what are some of the differences?
Right. So with the UK and the Netherlands, the one thing is that it's part of the education is that you have to apply to a course, to a direct subject or course. So you need to know what you're going to apply for, which is very similar to what happens here in South Africa. You apply to a department or to a course, not to the university as a whole, and figure out what you want to do. You need to know what you're going to do. In the UK, courses tend to be 3 years in the UK, 4 if you go into Scotland. The Netherlands, it depends on what kind of universities you get accepted to. If it's an applied science universities, it's usually a 4-year degree, because one of those years is going to be experiential learning and internships. Or if you go to a research university, it will be a 3-year degree. The US and Canada are really popular because of the fact that you can change your mind. And if you're not too sure about what you want to study, then you have the option of exploring before you declare your major. So in the US and both, I think in Canada, it's a 4-year degree that your bachelor's is a 4-year degree. And one of the biggest attraction that has happened with Canada in a few years is the fact that students are encouraged and they have the ability to actually stay there longer after they graduate, and then even get a path to immigration where they can actually even stay there and settle. So it has really become really popular in the last couple of years. The Netherlands, because of the fact that in the Netherlands, if you have an EU passport, regardless of where you've been living in a European Union country, you will actually pay local fees, which is really affordable in comparison to paying international fees. So, and many of my families in South Africa tend to have, more than one passport because of ancestry and so on. So it is really it makes sense financially, if you can afford it. And they have great universities. So definitely been popular recently.
Oh, good. Well, I think that's really interesting. And I think it's striking that Canada does recognize the value of having students come from abroad, international, come do education, and then gives them a path to citizenship. My understanding is like a 6-month path or, something that's fairly short. And yet here in the US, it's dozens of years. It's just so striking. It's just such a striking difference. So that leads me to the next question. How does the political climate factor into those decisions? You mentioned having safety and welcoming environment. So what are you finding that parents, especially over the last, 4 or 5 years, what have you observed for that, Wendy?
So in the US, when we had the previous administration, I actually had parents the same day that the winnings were announced call me and cancel their contract because they were like, we're not going to the US. It really went that people were not going to the US. They kept watching what was happening, and a lot of the policies that came from that administration were not very welcoming to international students. So I saw a huge shift into Canada. That's actually when Canada became extremely popular. Even today, people will tell me, I have my guided path survey where I do my USA survey, where do you want to study and so on. And is there something that I need to know? And I have had people say to me, I want to be in blue states, or I need to be in a state, in a place where the color of my skin is not going to be an issue. And it's the reality. It does come to me, and it's something that I also have to keep in mind. Like if I have a Muslim family come to me thinking about the USA, I have to become aware of what's where they're probably going to be in a better place, because while not everybody is the same, there is a different experience depending on where you go. So it is something that I've had to keep in mind, as well as the families that are coming to me. Gun violence has always, makes the news. So, and especially when it happens at universities, so it does make people concerned about picking the US. In the UK, however, everybody has issues. So that's one thing I have to say. It's not unique to the US, but like Brexit just happened, and that has had a huge impact into who's going there and who's going to pay home fees against, if you're settled, and are you now going to be paying international fees, which has made the international fee application system in the UK even more competitive, because now kids that were considered local are now international. So now you're competing not only with the other internationals around the world, but now the EU people are part of the pool, which then comes to the whole situation with scholarships, because now instead of paying home fees, those who were in the EU are now having to also apply for the same scholarships that the other kids that were in other areas have to pay. So that's definitely has an influence. And also with what's happening in the news and how the whole refugee situation, how governments respond to those type of crises, people are watching, and they need to decide, am I going to send my child to a place like this. So yes, it parents have to look, and I mean, I would too if that was my situation. It's definitely something that happens, and which is it's funny because Canada comes up on top often because they have been very welcoming to a lot of the crisis, refugees and things that are happening in the world. They have certainly put out a message out there that they are welcome. And I know that there's been a lot of drives in the US, especially with your welcome here, a lot of universities saying that, but it definitely impacts where parents send their kids. And I can see, I mean, I don't have statistics with me, but there has been drop from students from certain regions applying to certain areas, depending with what is happening in the political scene. So absolutely, people, it definitely affects. And for universities, I believe that because international students are such a big source of funding because they're paying higher fees and sometimes full fees, right. It cannot also be good for them. So yeah, we only hope that things are going to get better and that, that changes. But absolutely, people watch, and politics will always influence where the options are, because at the end of the day, it's all about options and where do you go. And families are aware that they can go to different places. So, as they become more knowledgeable about that, then they make choices accordingly.
That's true. That's true. So how would you say that COVID, or the global pandemic, has that shaped things in a different way? Many students were not able to go away last year, and maybe update us as to what the status is in South Africa. I don't know what your status is there. So
yeah, well, we have a variant, the South African variant that they talk about, and it's funny because we are being banned from flying. I mean, Emirates has actually canceled all flights to South Africa for a long time now. The reality is that we have quite a high recovery rate. So it isn't doom and gloom like they predicted that Africa was just going to be a disaster. It really isn't. We hear the news and we're like, we're okay. I mean, we're safe. We have had a more strict lockdown where, masks are the law. So it isn't a choice. You have to wear it. And so as far as our safety, it's been fine. I don't think it has deterred families from applying abroad. If any, I have to say, I probably had one of my better years in 2020 during COVID, because people also became more familiar with, being online, consulting online. And the fact that many universities also started their courses online. So that class that was supposed to start that September didn't. They kind of stayed locally and they did okay. It was adjustments because of time differences, but they succeeded. So I did not see a decline. If anything, things got more connected, in this area where people even have more time to go attend webinars and learn about where they can go. And people were home. You had like a captive audience, and it was and a lot of universities made very good use of that. And one of the things that I do is share information about anything that's happening in the regions that I work with, so that students can join and learn and be exposed, so that they can make choices about where they want to go. So I say that COVID, if anything, has actually brought more awareness to the possible places that they can go and study. I will be happy to hear what people from other regions that are working with students, how that affected them. But for here in South Africa, it's definitely made people more aware of the choices that they have.
Oh, that's good. That's good to hear. And I think you're right. I mean, we've seen through COVID and the pandemic, the colleges have made a phenomenal pivot. And I think they really are recognizing and embracing doing more virtual, and it's actually going to help them spread their word, because they're not limited by how many college visits, physical visits. They can do much more virtually. So I think we're going to see a lot of that stay. They're probably reevaluating what they're going to do and how they're going to do things. So how do you help families? You've mentioned, helping families understand rankings and helping students to find that best fit. How do you communicate that? And what are your approaches for helping families to understand that, especially when they're trying to study abroad?
Yeah. So it depends on the region that they want to go to. But the one thing that I always say, because they come to me immediately with the brand names and so on. And it's the whole thing about not one size fits all. Harvard is not for everybody. It is not. And I've had students when I was at the American school that will go and do the summer program and come back and say, wonderful, I have such a great time. Not for me. And and it is. It's like you're going to be living there. And if you don't experience it, we have a lot of schools here that are private. And I always say to people, there's a reason why you picked this school over that one, because you fit in. It's the place that you felt like really that you could, be part of. And one of the things that I do is education, is educating people about, what they need to be looking at when considering a university, and to also expose, I don't shy away from, okay, you want to apply to, the brand names, great. But how about this school or that school? And this is where things like Guided Path and the FIS Guide to Colleges, which is digital, and I show them, look who this overlap. And I always use Tufts University because people don't know about Tufts. They probably know a lot more about it because I always talk about them now. But I'll say to them, have you ever heard of this university? And they're like, no. And I was like, look who it compares to. MIT, Harvard. And they're like, whoa. And it's just, it lets them know, like, you know what, you should consider those schools that you haven't, heard of. It also helps when I have visited the schools. I have walked through campuses and being able to say, this person, that person, that person, that person, because I know that they will be very happy there. I had a student one year that wanted to go study in New York. And I was like, nope. I grew up there. Nope. Go to Hawaii. She went to Hawaii. She was very happy. You are not going to be happy. Like, you get to know your students. You know who's going to be a good fit somewhere or not. And so definitely educating them about the different options that they have. When you have visited as a college counselor, and that's really important because you really get to see the culture of the university and know whether someone's going to be able to be successful there, or have a good idea. So that's definitely that. I also talk about rankings and about the pros and cons about them, and making them aware that there is usually an agenda behind whoever did the ranking, so that they understand, well, what do you think that means, and so on. So it isn't that it is useless, but to be more, to look at it more objectively, that it's not everything. And it doesn't mean that the other school is not good. I also, when I recommend universities, I tend to go by who is highly ranked for the subject that they're looking for, not so much the brand name. And I sit down with families and I explain my reasoning behind why I think this is a good place and so on. So definitely education, recommending from experience, guiding them to places like, things like the FIS Guide to Colleges, and getting them to do that. And also now with, again, I mean, that I'm a Guided Path advocate. So the tours, I have lots of resources, niche, what you need, getting to see what students that are there are saying. UCAS has actually not just updated the UCAS hub, and there's a lot of opportunity to actually talk to students that are currently enrolled in universities in open days and so on. So there's so much. We are so connected now that they really have the opportunity to really do the research and see, are you going to be happy there? Follow their YouTube. My son tells me straight that Facebook is for old people. He tells me
on Facebook, right?
He tells me, like, Mom, it's just for moms to embarrass their children. I say, yes, that's true, but you're not going to get information on Instagram that you would on a Facebook page for a university that is listing their research, what they've done, and so on. So I always encourage my students and say, I know that you probably don't have a Facebook account, but when you're doing research, go look at those pages, because when you're doing that essay about why us, you can probably pick up one or two things in there that will help you to drop it into your essays, and it shows that you have done your research. So absolutely, it's about combining everything in what you know as a counselor, and guiding people in the right directions. And at the end of the day, I tell my families, you don't have to go. And it happens. I have a student that to this day still hurts me, but he got into Colombia and he chose to stay at Stellenbosch. And I just like, it's Colombia. And so he was happy. And and he's probably gonna graduate. So at the end of the day, like I tell my families, it's about opportunities. It's about having options so that you can make the decision that's going to be best for you. It's
right on
that. That's what we do.
To write on that, we also have a question about the best place to find subject rankings. Is that Facebook too, or is that somewhere else?
Oh, I usually use Drugs Guide to colleges. That's one of the things that I will go to Rugs, then I will go to Niche and do like best school for, and then I kind of compare across. So I don't just use the one. And if it is true, you will kind of see the same schools come up, and then you can kind of figure out like, okay, good, this has been ranked, the top for that subject, and so on. So I use quite a few different types of resources. But Rugs is definitely one of the ones that I would recommend.
So I put Rugs in the chat, also Niche. And also one I would recommend is College Express, because they'll have a list of majors. And if anyone is familiar with Steve Antonoff's The College Finder, all his list and everything are contained in College Express. So and of course, going to Steve's book is also the first direct source. So that's really, do you have your students do Twitter? Do they look at Twitter or follow Twitter, or is that also an old person thing too?
I never did Twitter. To me, Twitter is thinking out loud. This is too new for me. So I'm Facebook, Instagram. That's kind of where I am. Twitter, it was just like, I don't know about that. So I'm not sure. I'll ask my son though, although they are Snapchat and they come up with some stuff, and I'm just
TikTok.
Like,
are they doing?
Yes,
TikTok?
All of that. And it's just like, okay. So yeah, but Facebook is definitely old people. He tells me straight, it's like, Mom, we don't do Facebook.
So how do you help the parents find that comfort level? And you share all these things and they're able to see all these different resources. How do you meet those concerns and things for the parents then, Wendy?
So a lot of it, so I have my structure for the students, but there's also homework for the parents. So the way that I work, it's that we are doing this together. It's not just, here's my child, here, go help them. It's like, no, your child's going to be doing this. You and I are going to be sitting down and talking about, other things. So it become, well, especially with the finances, which is one of the biggest things in the region that I'm at. It's, one of the things that I love about Guided Path, and I keep talking about it, is that EFC calculator. Although it's a generic, and it's not the real calculator, it's not the CSS profile, they can go and make mistakes there. And then we sit down and we look at it and we go, right. So let's talk about why they think you're going to donate a library if you can afford $163,000 a year. And they're like, what? So it's about educating them and taking them through things. One of the things that I'm really advocating, especially for international counselors, is like, people don't know how to do CSS profiles. I know that you, Cyndy, ran a webinar for us, and I still use that. I actually send people to that link to this day so that they know what they're doing and how they're doing things. When I also recommend universities, once I have that list that I recommend, I make sure that the parent and the student is sitting with me to go over why I recommend them. So because at the end of the day, they are financing this and they have to trust that the child's going to be in this place. So I do make them part of, the whole process and what is happening. I do have an open door policy that they can email me, contact me whenever they have any questions. We have check-ins, like I will have that meeting, and then if by the end of July, we finalize the first list. So we sit down again as a family and say, how do you feel about this? What are your concerns? What are you thinking? And so on. So it's not just ignoring the family, but making them part of the whole application process, because at the end of the day, this is their child that's going to be going away and they need to be comfortable. So I can only, support, and I am available even after our time is off. I actually just got an email 3 days ago from a student that graduated from my alma mater. They actually went to Fordham, and it's like, and they graduated, and the mom sent me the picture saying, look, this has happened. Thank you so much for helping through this process. So I don't disappear, and it's amazing. It's like, oh my God, I'm old. Look at this. My kids are graduating college already. So it's that, but it's like, you're part of that, and it feels great, and when you're there for the parents, you're in it together. So it's not just you, we're all doing this. And when they get accepted, I always congratulate the parents. I always say, when kids get admitted, it's like, this is your work too. If you weren't there supporting, this wouldn't happen. So we all celebrate, as I tell them, congratulations, you've also been accepted to XYZ college, because it's your work as well. So yeah, it's just being available. I think it makes parents a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, it does. And I tell my parents too, even though you're a child, and I told my student, you're going to college, but your parents are sending you. So this is a family experience. It truly is. But when you're a parent, it's hard enough for parents to send their children away to college, but you're sending them away to a whole nother country. That adds a whole nother level, as you said, of, worry about safety and security, and is it the right place? Is the color of their skin going to be an issue, or the clothes that they wear, their religion, or all those things? Those are definitely things to be cognizant of and aware of. So bringing that comfort and that security to parents can make a big difference. So wow, so any other words of advice or suggestions, things that you have found as you've worked with international parents that has worked for you? So what are some other tips or recommendations that you would have, Wendy?
I will say that for counselors who are working with international families is to educate, try to share what you know, in whichever way, you have, like whether it's social media, if you have Instagram, I've been running lots of webinars, especially now that everybody's happy to be on Zoom, just kind of educating them and sharing the information. Because at the end of the day, when they feel that they can trust you because they feel like you know what you're talking about, it's you're going to attract the families that need your help. So definitely help, share information as much as you can with your families. That's going to be that. I also find that when I'm working with the families, a lot of the process at the beginning is education. So researching, knowing like how to evaluate this school from this school. What should you actually be paying attention to? That it's not just the brand name, but look at what is the student support, where you're going to be, how's the neighborhood that you're going to be there? Is there an airport nearby? What would happen? Would you prefer to be in the East Coast because it's a 15-hour flight as opposed to California, which is going to be a lot longer? So all of these things, you need to take into account. And I think also as counselors, right now with everything that's happening, how we are digitized and we have so much availability to like webinars and so on, get yourself familiar with as many universities, especially those ones that you don't know about. I actually say that I'm slowly having a PhD on the Netherlands, because they had this fantastic 1 week workshop for counselors. And I think I'm still digesting it because there's so much I can do in like,
Uh-huh.
and they actually are really good. But I see there's so much out there as far as, and like what you do now, where you cannot attend, but then you can watch the webinar later. I mean, Ethan Swear, the college essay guy, like he is like guru for everything. And he has just run like webinars that have been fantastic. And I immediately started using his tips with my current class. And it's just, don't stop learning. It is so much easier now to get more familiar with everything that is happening out there and all the options that are available. And obviously you cannot do everything, but pick the things that you like in the areas that you like, and become more familiar with them. And it's so easily for you to get that information. So, take advantage of COVID world. If there's anything that, if you can think about a silver lining, is the fact that information is a lot easier now.
There is a question too about whether it's hard to get students to write a revealing application essay. U.S. college admissions readers want to hear personal stories. U.S. students may be prepared, but this varies across cultures. So, any words of wisdom on that?
So what I do is that I run workshops where I introduce you the prompts, and I'm going to talk specifically for the U.S. Where I introduce the prompts and what is actually asking you, so that they know immediately like what is the goal that you're trying to get to that. Ethan Swear, if you don't know him, college essay guide, go watch his workshops. He has just updated his outline, the way that they do essay outline, which is like brilliant. And that is one thing that I have incorporated myself into my practice this year, is outlining, making sure that the student has a structure of what they're going to talk about. And then before they do the first draft, I meet with them one-on-one, and they have to walk me through it, because I'm going to ask those questions. And why are you saying that? So what does that look like in your life? So how will the reader know what you're trying to say? How can you show it? So absolutely, in South Africa, one of the things that I have found, the boys do not like to write about themselves. It's a very weak kind of culture. We did this and we went up this, in the riding the bikes or playing whatever, whatever they're doing is very much we. And it's like, but what about you? How did that make you feel? So that is where you, the counselor, come in, and having an outline is absolutely brilliant, because you kind of make them plot the skeleton and then walk you through it. And it's like, right, great. After you're happy, go write your first essay. So that will be my big advice. Go watch Ethan's workshops. He's brilliant.
And I just put a link to the college essay guy and excuse me, in the chat too. And I've interviewed and done Friday forums with Ethan too. I've known him for a long time as well. Well, that's great. Thank you, Wendy. So we have time for a couple of questions. I see some in the chat as well. So Jeffrey asked, in addition to the Netherlands, there are opportunities to study English in other countries throughout Europe. Are there, other places that students can go? And and we haven't talked about Australia at all.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, Australia actually is another favorite in South Africa. I will say that from the UK, it was either that or New Zealand. New Zealand actually is also quite popular. I haven't done them just because there's only one of me and there's so much I can monitor. But it's definitely there. I will also say that places that are becoming popular include Spain. Spain has realized that there's a lot, by offering English language programs, they are attracting quality students, which is what the Netherlands has done, is that they have English language programs that they are catering to international students. And they even have what is called the university colleges, where it's like a liberal arts type of education. They're quite selective, but it's again to open up that opportunity for people that don't quite know what they want to do yet. Germany, definitely another place that people like to go to. So they are definitely, I would say, so Australia, Germany, and there are, another thing that you need to keep in mind is that there are many universities that have satellite campuses. I know that I believe Fordham has one in Italy, and they actually just opened up a campus in the UK in London. So you also have like the American International School of University in Paris. You have Marist that has also in Italy. So there's also the opportunity of having a US style education in a different country. So there's also those options. I mean, my one student is got into NYU. He's going to be going to Shanghai. So there's also those options that you don't necessarily have to find that English program, but that many universities do have satellite campuses that you can explore and give them as an option for families that prefer to stay, there.
Good. So you've mentioned several times college affordability and colleges that can offer scholarships to students. So what are some colleges that you're familiar with that are pretty generous to international students in particular?
So I'm going to first talk about it by region, because it's what I do with my families when they say, I ask them a very honest question, which is, how much can you afford? And they're going to say, oh, $10,000. And it's like, you're going to go to Harvard then, because that's going to be the only one you're going to be able to go for a community college. Right. So, and then what I actually turn around and say to them, if you got accepted to Harvard, how much money would you be able to afford to put aside to send your child? Like, what is the maximum? And then it kind of gets them thinking, because they're taking the bait for the brand name. And then you get to know, like, okay, so that is what you can afford. And so region-wise, people that need scholarship, this is for the 4 regions that I work with, which is the US, UK, Canada, and the Netherlands. It goes like this. USA is going to be the most generous for international students. It's hands down the most generous. Then you have Canada, which gives you merit scholarships, and they're not full. But you do have one of two, universities that give like presidential scholarship, like UBC, but they will be second one on my list. Then I will have the Netherlands, especially if they have a EU passport. And the last one will be for me, the UK, because the UK, unfortunately, doesn't need to be very generous. They have lots of students applying. So they will probably be the least one to try to get financial aid from it. And I always tell my families, if you're thinking about the UK, you're probably paying full fees. It's just, that's how it is. So there, I mean, in the US, you have the usual suspects, which is the Ivy Leagues. If you get there and you have need, they probably have a lot of funding to pay, for universities. But one thing that I'll probably share with you, which it's funny because I'm actually running a workshop for the IACAC this summer, and this is one of the things we're talking about, paying for college in the US. If you have ever heard of Jeff Levy and the Levy and Kent list, I will say that, I mean, those are like my guides for finding money for students in the US specifically. I usually, they have Excels that I download every August. I bless them. I often offer them, like, I will help you because I can't believe you do this for free. And it is for free. You can go to the website and download it. What I do is that I will download the data and manipulate it and then subtract the full cost from the average scholarship. And then you have your expected family contribution. Very rough. And I mean, that's not necessarily how it will be, but it allows me to see, like, wow, if that person got in here, they will be paying $11,000 out of pocket and so on. So it is one, and it has actually allowed me to find places like Mills College that is actually quite generous. Soka University in California, they are like fantastic. They really, I'm hoping they stay hidden for long because they really are very generous. So international students, and they're not so hard to get into. Yeah, and they're not hard to get into. So it's also looking at those public universities that are affordable. And again, it all depends on the budget that your family has. So there is quite a bit, but definitely download those guys by Jeff Levy and Kent, because they are fantastic in helping you figure out, finances. There is another website, I believe it's IEFA.org. that is that you can actually say where you're from, where you want to study, and what subject you want to study, and it will actually give you a list of scholarships that you can apply for as an international. That is a lot of more work because it's scholarship, like not bursaries directly from the university, but it is there. So IFA.org will be another place for you to go and have a look, for funding.
Great.
Cool.
So I've put that in there. And also I put links to Jenny Kent, who is an international counselor. She's from Colombia, and Jeff Levy. So the link to their resources is on their website. And if you go click on, it's called Big J. Consulting, I believe. Big J Educational Consulting.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a link to resources. So yeah, they do research on early decision, regular decision acceptance rates,
Mm-hmm.
and then also on scholarships, financial aid for non-resident alien undergraduates. So they do that every year. Well, Wendy, thank you very much. This has just been so delightful. Carmen, are there any other outstanding questions?
Just got one, and it was the name of the college in California that has good scholarships. It was SoCal.
SoCal. So SOKA.
Yeah, SOKA.
Like the dance.
And it's in Aliso Viejo, I believe. And it's a beautiful campus. Well, thank you again. And everyone, thank you for being with me today and with Wendy. We're so glad to have had you. And it's so nice to share from counselor to counselor. And we really appreciate being able to hear your perspective and what challenges you face and how you've met them. And that helps us all. Next week, I'm going to insert, let me put it this way, an extra Friday forum. So it's going to be an open forum, and it's waitlist purgatory. So, how are your students doing? We're now almost a month past the May 1 deadline. Are students getting off? I know you mentioned professional development and different conferences. That's one of the benefits that I've seen from COVID too, is we've been able to go to all these conferences just sitting in our office. And we just finished the WACAC, the Western Association for College Admission Counselors, yesterday. And many of you probably have participated in that this week, but hearing how Claremont McKenna last year took thousands of students, a large number of students off their wait list. And so far this year, I think he said they've taken 9, a very, very small number. So that's something that we all think about and we deal with our students. Is it worse this year? Is it better? So I'll pull up some statistics, but join me next week for that discussion. It's an open forum, and we'll talk about, how are your students doing? What's happening with that? And then I've got several great sessions lined up for coming in June. I'm going to be talking about newsletters. So in June, and we're also going to have as our guests Lisa Heffernan and from Grown and Flown. Many of you know that's a very popular website, Grown and Flown. It's a Facebook group, and she's going to be talking about transition planning. So join me in, and I'll see you all next week. Wendy, you can go, have a good rest of your evening. Yeah. So I know it's getting quite late there. Thank you again for everyone for sharing, and just let people know about the Friday Forum. I will be posting these on my website. I always post them as a blog, and we appreciate your support, and I'm glad that you're finding value in these Friday Forums. And Wendy, thank you again for your time.
You're welcome. Nice to be here. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.